Hey, all, what's going on? Welcome into our instant reaction show, recapping the Cotton Bowl. It just happened. This is something we'll do probably not tomorrow after every game, but tomorrow night once the Sugar Bowl's over, we'll jump on and recap. We're going to recap the Orange Bowl real quick, and it's just kind of our instant reaction to what just happened, right? Everything that we saw, kind of initial thoughts without much filtering through, and I think a headline of this game, if you had to put it, would be Miami controls Ohio State on the way to this upset. And so, ultimately, guys, this Miami was a 9.5 point favorite, all the way up pretty close to kickoff. I think the line moved a little bit towards them there late, but in the history of the college football playoffs since 2014, this is they're tied with the biggest upset. Right? Alabama was upset by Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl in the very first year in 2014. They were also 9.5 point dog. And so, Miami, and we said it here on the show on Sunday night, they had the pieces, they had the personnel, they had the recipe, right? And if they played their peak, their A game, that's what we said here. If they played their A game, if they played peak Miami football, they had the pieces to do this. And it played out just like the perfect scenario would look for Miami. If you've told Mario Cristobal that this game would go the way that it did, I think he probably in his mind would have thought this is exactly how it needed to go for Miami to win the football game. And that's they were able to run the football, they were able to stop the run, and they were able to rush the passer. And in this college football playoff bracket, that's ultimately going to be what gets you in the top tier. I think there's several tiers of these teams in this bracket, and I think there are very few that can do those three things and do them well. Miami's one of them, and that's what we said here on the show on Sunday night when we previewed the game, and that's exactly what happened. So if you look at the outcome of this game, Miami obviously was able to run the ball. Things started off early. I thought that Miami's defense, they did exactly what we thought they would on film. They played at one high most of the game. They played a lot of bump and run. They tried to close the middle of the field and stop the deep post and the deep overs. I think they were really successful with that. Jeremiah Smith on that third, I think it was the third drive Ohio State had, they got in 12 personnel and they got big. They went hard play action. They went Z cross X post with Jeremiah Smith at X. He ran the deep post. He ran a beautiful route and stemmed that guy up. I mean, number 4 runs the post as good as anybody I've ever seen in terms of he just gets on those guys' toes and gets on top of the route. He leans, 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 and stems it. And then when he sticks it, he just separates. And I mean, he is just, I mean, he's like a missile when he does that post step and he runs it to the post. I thought that they really kept that down, and it was almost like the Indiana game all over again in terms of what Miami wanted to do and limited those explosives, giving Sayin as little confidence as possible in the drop back game. And in the first half, they did all they could to kind of kill his confidence. I mean, that 3 sacks in the first quarter. Bain and Mesidor were just they had those. I mean, I wrote it down a note. I think it was on. I guess it's the third series of that Ohio State. It was right after the long completion to Jeremiah Smith. It was just like Ohio State's tackles are in hell right now because they were just they could not block them. And I think the game plan was for Ohio State that they were going to try to hit those explosives and move the ball down the field. And it was very obvious from the get go they could not block Miami's front. And I thought Miami's corners did a good job when they were asked to play some man when it got to third manageable. And they didn't convert a whole lot, right? And they kept getting them off the field. Ohio State could not run the ball. They had negative yards rushing in the first half, and I think they really liked the commitment in the first half of running the ball, and that's what got them down 14-0. Um, I mean, if you look, I thought Miami was really committed to running the football. Fletcher ran hard from very early on. I thought it was that second drive it started to show like Ohio State was having trouble tackling him. The first guy getting to him, and he was really breaking a lot of tackles. And you know, I thought that Miami really missed an opportunity there when they fumbled in the red zone on their second drive. But ultimately, that didn't end up being a big play in the game at all. If you had told me right then that that was not going to be a major play in the game, not one of the top 5 plays in the game, even that it must have going to been a game that would go Miami's way pretty heavily. Um, I thought that Miami had no problem pressing 4 and 17. Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, they were just like, you know what? We're not going to treat them any differently than we would other receivers. We're going to play our defense, and we're going to let our guys play. And they got hands on and they're physical. The refs, I thought they called a great game. No flags until the fourth quarter. The one in the fourth quarter there, everybody thought was pass interference. Uh, that DPI against Ohio State should have been called, and it wasn't. But I love that the game was called like it was. They let them play. There weren't hardly any flags at all, and Miami benefited from that too because they got hands on those receivers and they really threw the timing of Ohio State's passing game off. And I thought Miami's offensive game plan was to a T what I thought that they needed to do. I thought they needed to commit to the run with Fletcher. I thought they needed to try to get the ball in the hands of Malachi Tony, and I thought their drop back needed to be quick, out of the hand, rhythm throws for Carson Beck, high percentage throws, and they worked that. They threw the snag concept a good bit. They threw the speed outs a lot. Um, they hit some slants. They hit some hitches even, right? I think they did a really good job of recognizing what Ohio State's tendencies were playing zone versus man and what downs and distances, and then really attack those soft zones with some free access throws to let him get the ball out of his hands. Don't make him stand back there and face any type of pass rush. And I think they sacked him one time there in that drive right before the half that Miami had it going in and ended up having to punt, and they punted Ohio State deep. But they like Arvell Reese and those guys, they didn't have a big effect on the game because Miami wasn't asking Carson Beck to drop back 35 or 40 times and chunk it downfield. They were running the football and they were giving him high percentage throws, and that's ultimately why they were successful. Um, I really thought that Jeremiah Smith got his right. I mean, he had well over 100 yards receiving. The one fourth down touchdown. I mean, you just have a dude, and like they know they have a dude. Like they went play action. They pulled the guard and tried to get the linebackers, pulled up with that action. And he just ran a great route. If it's down there in the red zone, so things are really tight, he ran a great wind angle on that slant and ran it flat instead of skinny. And saying, you can tell he has a ton of confidence when he's throwing to that guy. And, number 4 is really special. And in the second half, I thought that's what Ohio State did much better. They got the ball out of Sayan's hands. They committed to running the football. They ran some counter. They ran some buck sweep, and they were effective. And excuse me, they really got the ball out of Sayan's hands quick. They threw some high percentage stuff, a lot like Miami did in the first half with Beck, and they moved the ball right down the field and they scored. Um, and I thought that was a really big part of their success in the second half was getting out of that. Hey, we're going to have a lot of drop back. We're going to have saying try to really do these full field progressions and stand back there. I mean, they couldn't block 3 and 4 though. Like that, I wrote down at halftime that OSU can't protect and their downfield passing game is non-existent because I mean, it really was like it does no good to call those dropbacks because he was getting pressure and getting sacked before he could ever see uh, anything develop. And you might as well change up what you're doing, right? You might as well try to run it on early downs. I thought they in the second half that's what they did. They came out. I want to say they came out, they had the 2 runs right off the bat with Walker for 13 yards, to get a first down. Then on the 4th play of the second half, he goes for 18. And hey, they're off to the races. You know what I mean? Like they're moving the football down the field. They're getting the ball out of Julian Sands' hands. And that 11-play touchdown drive, 7 runs on that drive, including the touchdown. And they were completely different. And Miami's pass rush was neutralized because they can't pin their ears back and go get the quarterback when they're having to play gap sound in the run game. And that's, that it took 4 and 3 really out of the game in a lot of ways in the second half. And that's how Ohio State had success moving the football there. I thought Miami had a big answer coming down and getting that field goal the next drive to make it 17-7. It kind of kept them at arm's length, right? Kept them from getting within, you know, 3 to 7 points. And then, OSU they just kept giving it to number 4. Like I said, he caught the 4th down touchdown and made it 17-14. And I mean, it was a ball game at that point, right? And I thought, once again, Ohio State really committed to being run first, high percentage throws, and their offense was much better for that in the second half. And Julian saying looked much more comfortable back there, and their offense moved, but they put themselves in that 14-0 hole. And in a game like that where Miami was going to ball control and hang on to that thing, that really that 14 points is almost like 21 or 24 points that you're not going to have but so many possessions to try to get back to even. And I thought that the 4th quarter drive, obviously when they make Miami punt down 17-14, there's 10 minutes left. That was the make it or break it drive right there. And they were running the football and they got to midfield, and then they kind of got in that one sequence. They got a little pass happy there, almost like they did in the first half. They got sacked, and then they got pressure, and they never really had a chance to get back out of that. And they had to punt the football, and they never really got it back until after Miami had really taken the clock down to less than a minute and punched the last touchdown in. And that was kind of that was it. It was done. My kind of main takeaways from this game, Miami controlled it. I don't think it was a very shocking result based on the game, based on what you saw each team do and what Miami was able to do. They controlled the line of scrimmage. I wouldn't say they dominated the line of scrimmage, but because Ohio State had some good run game going in the second half, but they really Miami could do what they wanted on the offensive front and the defensive front when they wanted to do it. And that was the difference in the game. And Ohio State really never had, other than Jeremiah Smith, and never had that go-to to try to bail them out, and really until it was too late. And once you start having to chuck it around there down, in the 4th quarter, you really don't have a shot because that Miami pass rush is getting after you so well. So, I really thought the game plan was Miami was great. I thought Shannon Dawson did an awesome job of committing to the run, giving Carson Beck those high percentage throws that get the ball out of his hands quick. And I thought maybe a turnover would swing this game either way, but Miami's didn't really affect them that much. Like I said, the Fletcher fumble on the second drive, but then the pick six, obviously, that was the point of the game where you're like, oh, like if you were sitting there watching, you really kind of set up, thought this is Miami's game to lose. And so, I thought that was a great play by Scott. Ohio State got in an unbalanced look where they had 3 receivers to one side and didn't have any eligibles on the other side. And so Jeremiah Smith was on the ball. Receiver was stacked behind him, so you knew Jeremiah Smith was ineligible. And I thought Scott did a great job. He just baited it, and he took off as soon as he knew what was coming, because in that type of look, really, they're probably throwing some perimeter screen, or they're probably trying to fox you or lock you and throw and fake a perimeter screen and throw it downfield. And he knew, hey, he didn't have any downfield responsibility. His responsibility was to go blow that play up, and he jumped it, and it was, I mean, it, textbook what you want from a defensive standpoint in terms of baiting that quarterback. And I think if you're saying there, you really got to be careful. I don't think, Jeremiah Smith's trying to block Scott, but he's really trying to get outside leverage on him because the receiver's bubbling behind him to the outside. So he wants to pin Scott inside, and it's a really hard block. And, that's just one of those deals, man. Like, that was probably a film thing. I'm sure that was a tendency thing, knowing in that formation they're going to be perimeter screen heavy, RPO heavy, and he knew his responsibility, hey, was to go blow that thing up, and he just jumped it and took it to the house. And, you know, that really ended up being the big play that put them up by 2 scores, and Ohio State was never really able to catch them. So, I thought it was uh, that was obviously huge in the game, and I thought the defensive game plan for Miami was great. I thought Corey Heatherman, the DC, I mean, he's done a great job all year, and it was no different in this game. What does this mean for Ohio State? For up until December the 6th, they were unbeatable. They were, the greatest defense we've ever seen in college football, and they're, nobody's going to touch them. They're going to go back to back. And then they played two teams that have, like talent to them, and they lost. They scored 10 points against Indiana. They scored 14 points against Miami. They lost the battle in the trenches against both of them. They could not run the football. They could not protect. Sayan was sacked 5 times tonight. He was sacked 5 times against Indiana. He'd been sacked 4 times all year before that. I mean, it came down to their personnel was finally on equal footing with somebody else, and they couldn't execute and win the football game in either instance against Indiana. And we mentioned here on the podcast in those games against Indiana and Texas too, Texas in the opener, that Ohio State struggled to run the ball. They struggled to protect the quarterback in those games, and the defense really won them the Texas game, holding Texas to 7, and kept them in the Indiana game, holding them to 13 and giving them a shot. And Ohio State kind of blew some chances, especially that one late where they missed the field goal to tie it in the Indiana game. In this game tonight, really, I didn't, I know Miami added the late score to kind of, put it out there to 10, and I, but I don't think this was like a 50-50 game. I really think it was more like a 65-35 game in favor of Miami in terms of who controlled the game and who could do what they wanted. And, uh, I really thought Miami's defensive front it was a difference in the game. And their offensive line and their running backs came to play as well. And that, I think, for Miami, this means that you're obviously a contender. In this 12-team playoff, we're still just in the second year, so we're looking for different trends and stuff like that in these playoffs. And so far, it seems to be that you might want to play in the first round and catch a team coming off, 24-day layoff in the quarters and get hot and get healthy and roll. And so we'll see what Miami does in the semis, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Ole Miss. But make no mistake, it's going to sound like an echo from Sunday night show. They have the personnel. They have the pieces. They are able to do the things that championship DNA teams in college football are able to do, and that is get after the quarterback, run the football when they want to, and stop in the run when the other team wants or needs to run it. And you saw that tonight. You saw it against Texas A&M in the first round game, and whoever they play in the semifinals, you're going to see that again. And I think to deal with Miami, you probably need to be able to commit to the run the football very heavily, try to slow down that pass rush as much as you can, because I do think that could possibly be the scariest single part of any team left in this thing is Miami's defensive line. So if any unit of anybody's quarterback or anybody's offensive line that's left or anybody's secondary, whatever it is, Miami's defensive line might be the scariest thing left in this whole bracket. And so if you've got that and you're bringing that out to play, it doesn't matter who's left. You're going to be on equal or better footing than the team you're playing because those guys are they're difference makers, and that's the type of stuff that wins national championships. So hats off to Miami and Mario Cristobal because they built this team through the trenches, and this is the team they've been building towards. They lost a couple of games that against Louisville and SMU where they were inconsistent, and Carson Beck didn't have great games in those games. But this defense is something that's been pretty consistent all year, and they're going to be trouble for whoever they play going forward. And I'm really excited to see that. So, really excited for tomorrow as well. Once again, we got those 3 other quarterfinal games that if you're like me, you're going to sit there on your couch from noon to midnight tomorrow and take it all in and really enjoy this part of the playoff that we've gotten to, and really excited to see who else gets to the semifinals. Can anybody break this first round bye curse so far in this 12-team playoff era? 0 for 5 the teams that catch a first round bye. So all 4 teams lost last year. Miami beat Ohio State tonight, who had a bye, and so we'll see if uh, Texas Tech, Indiana, or Georgia can break that trend tomorrow and get into the semifinals after having that first round bye. So, guys, once again, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that like button. Follow us on Twitter and TikTok. Uh, Follow us on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And, guys, Happy New Year. Looking forward to watching these games. We will have an instant reaction show as soon as the Sugar Bowl ends tomorrow night and recap the rest of those quarterfinals. See you guys later.